Sportsnet's Sean Reynolds joins us from the aforementioned Manitoba Capital today. He's got his lid on today, and a Spurs lid. I've got to ask you, Sean, have you lost weight or did you grow your hair out or both? It struck me the other day watching you on TV.
It's both. I lost the weight in here, and I'm trying to grow it back with the hockey hair. So, yeah, as the story goes, I was heading to the bubble in Edmonton to cover the playoffs, and I'd been in quarantine for a while and went to put the suits on, and 2/3 of them didn't fit. So that was a problem. I needed to take care of that, and I did some exercising, some better eating. I dropped 40 pounds before Christmas. So, I needed to get the house in order, so to speak. You know, the quarantine hits everybody in different ways. It hit me hard, so I needed to hit back.
Good for you. I just thought that my suits shrunk. That's what I thought. Dang, it might be me. Anyways, we got a lot of things to get to with you, but let's start with the Flames beating the Jets last night by 1. It seems to me that these teams are very even. I figured it would be a 1-goal game, kind of a disputed ending in the contest. How did you feel about that Jets-Calgary game last night at the Dome?
Yeah, it looks like every time these two teams are going to play, they're going to be right there with each other. I think there was a little bit of a feeling that maybe the Flames had taken steps to get ahead of the Jets, the way things went in the playoffs last year. But, I mean, you take Laine out of that lineup and Scheifele out of that lineup with injury, and that just so affects the depth that the Jets had in that situation that I think, you know, people feel like Calgary was maybe a step above. I had them finishing ahead of the Jets in this division, but clearly the way that those two teams play when they get against each other, it's always a tight game, the same as it is between the Jets and Edmonton, to be honest. So as for last night's game, it looked to me like, you know, that was the 4th straight game that the Jets had played Calgary. Calgary played a game against Edmonton in between, which I think was good for them. It sparked a little bit of life back into that team, them igniting things with the Battle of Alberta, because they were looking a little flat to me by the end of that 3-game set. I think the Jets, who are playing a better 5-man defensive game this year, look to be kind of wearing them down, frustrating them, making them take, you know, decisions that I'm not used to seeing that Calgary team make, taking risks that didn't pay off for them. So what I saw in that game last night was a return to Calgary kind of buckling down, and I think that's the kind of game that you can expect from both those teams when you see them playing against each other for the rest of this season and potentially into the playoffs.
Right. So I'll be honest, I watched 2 periods of the game, and I really didn't notice Pierre-Luc Dubois. I looked up the stat line after, 0, 0, 0, -1, and even he said he could be better. What were the expectations in Winnipeg for Dubois' first game as a Jet?
Not much at all, I don't think. And that's not saying anything about the player. It's saying about, you know, talking about the 2-week quarantine. I believe he said in the postgame yesterday he'd never been injured before, so he'd never missed time. And so all of a sudden he goes from, what was it, game 5 to game 14 or 15 or something like that. I guess not in the Jets case, but I mean, he misses 2 weeks of time and spent that time trying to stay in shape in his living room with equipment that the Jets had dropped off that he could take part in. That may work for you and I, but when you're, you know, an elite level athlete, you know, getting those reps in, being on the ice, staying sharp, it's the difference between succeeding and not succeeding on the ice. So Paul Maurice had said, you know, he's only going to get better. He liked some of the things that he saw from him. But I don't think they were expecting him to go out and score 3 goals and light it up. Although I think they were doing everything they could last night to kind of spark a fire. They put Kyle Connor, who, you know, is basically the Jets' best scorer, on his line to try and get something going there. They started with Trevor Lewis, I think simply because he was a right wing, and moved him off fairly quickly and put Mason Appleton up there, who's got, you know, legs to burn. You know, he can really move and has been putting the puck in the net and having some success. So they're trying to get him going, you know, maybe create some early confidence. But, you know, the fact that he played the way he did last night and wasn't able to produce, I don't think surprises anyone, and I don't think anyone's worried about it.
So what everybody wants to talk about today is Patrik Laine and the benching the other night. Yeah. Were you surprised it happened this soon?
I am surprised. I'm really surprised. And, you know, the first thing that I thought, because I was watching the game as it happened and was kind of blown away because, you know, one, you're thinking, you know, here's a new player, a star player, clearly the biggest star power they would have other than maybe Seth Jones. And even then, probably, the biggest star power they would have. And, he's coming into a new system. He's been through a bit of a quarantine. He's been through, a tough situation in Winnipeg. And you'd think that what it would take for a guy like that to be benched in a situation like that, you think you'd be giving him all the rope you could, considering the situation that he's coming out of. But, I mean, with the reports coming out that he had, I don't want to call it an altercation, but it sounds like he didn't respond too well to one of the assistant coaches. I was surprised, to be honest with you. I didn't really see that coming. I didn't think that or expect that he was going to be benched. I think that he's been a good teammate. I think that a lot of times when you take guys who have, offensive capabilities like that, you got to learn to take the good with the bad. So I don't look at him as being a player who needs to be, he's, I think, got 3 goals since he showed up there. I think he was a goal-a-game player. I don't know what else you're asking for a guy. Do you need him to be the most offensive player on the team? Probably not, but you do need him to check in. But, I think they've made it clear there that it's more about the interaction with one of the staff members that has caused that issue. So I was surprised to see that and hoping that they can figure that out there because, I mean, clearly at this stage, the Columbus Blue Jackets need Patrik Laine and Patrik Laine, who's under contract or under team control with that team for another 3 years, needs the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Were you surprised because you couldn't believe that Laine would lip off a coach? Like, because you've been around him? Is that why you were surprised, or why were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like for something like that to happen that quickly, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would, tell a coach that he barely knows off. I mean, I don't know, maybe frustrations were boiling to the surface. Anything I would do at this stage would be speculating. But yeah, I didn't see that coming. I mean, I had thought I'd saw a couple of the plays and thought, okay, maybe that's why he's getting benched. And if that's the case, boy, oh boy, is John Tortorella setting a precedent here. And look, I've had conversations with some people about the industry. John Tortorella is a coach of a team that probably doesn't have the best lineup, and yet 2 years ago they knocked off the Tampa Bay Lightning in 4 straight games in the playoffs, and last year they knock off the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is a team that succeeds because it gets buy-in, and I think it's trouble. You don't get buy-in from the rest of your team if you're going to make exceptions for certain guys. So I had thought, maybe that's the case, but just doing it so early I thought was risky and, affecting the relationship that you have with Patrik Laine. If it's a case where he's, having a improper interaction with a coach, I don't think that's something that you can ignore. But yeah, I'm surprised it happened. I didn't see something like that coming, and it makes me want to know what happened that led up to that. It would be great to hear both sides of the story.
The poll question today is who will last longer in Columbus, Torts or Laine, and it's presented by Capital Auto Mall, or in Winnipeg, Capital Ford, right across from Polo Park Mall. Glenn Elm writes in on YouTube. He says if Laine was smart, he'd embrace Torts. He's only going to make him better. It's hard to tell a young kid that. And the burning question I have for you, Sean, this is where I noticed your striking weight loss, was your stand-up the other day on Paul Maurice calling out the Winnipeg media. And I had to shoot a text to a Winnipeg media member. I said, who was Paul calling out? And he says it was all of Winnipeg. It wasn't one reporter. It was just the negativity in town. Did I get the right report on that? Did you get off Kyle Connor here? We're 6-3-1, which they were at the time, and that was the basis of your report. Was that a testy day?
Oh yeah. And so it was me who asked the question that Paul Maurice really went off on, and yeah, I didn't take that as targeted at me. He'd referenced a number of different things that had happened. He'd referenced a question that had been asked by a different reporter the night before about a play that reporter had thought Blake Wheeler was at fault for a goal, and Paul Maurice took exception with that. To me, he was calling out the media, he was calling out Twitter, he was calling out hockey fans, and he was essentially saying, you got to back off my captain here. The question that I'd asked, essentially, because you could tell he was getting testy every time this came up with Blake Wheeler, the question that I had asked was, do you think based on what Blake Wheeler's done as a captain of this team, what he's done for the franchise, what he's done in the past, did he deserve a buff suffer from this criticism that he was receiving, maybe for some time to get his game going again. And I was just reading Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts, and he'd said in there that part of that he thought was the fact that, Paul Maurice thought, that Blake Wheeler deserves more. Being a guy who decided to stay in Winnipeg, stay with the team, has represented them so long. My response to that is, he stayed in Winnipeg because he got paid a whole lot of money, over $8 million, to stick around over the course of a contract that is probably not going to be beneficial for the Winnipeg Jets by the time it's said and done. I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve credit for the things he's done. It's why I'd ask the question, is because I recognize all the things that he's done. But I think what's happened here in this situation is, if you were to ask Blake Wheeler, and if you were to ask Paul Maurice to be honest about it, whether Blake Wheeler was playing his best hockey or not right now, the answer to that would be no. So what Paul Maurice did was he jumped out, he pushed back, he put up his dukes and said, anyone wants to fight, I'm here, I'm ready to go, and has created some space for Blake Wheeler to not be criticized. Now, the issue with that is, eventually the way that you stop the criticism is you just start playing so good you can't be criticized. Paul Maurice has bought that time for Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler still, a couple games later, or at least one game later, has yet to shut that criticism up with his play. And in the end, that's what it's going to take, because the criticism will come back no matter how testy Paul Maurice gets if this situation continues.
All right, wonderful explanation. And by the way, viewer Brady says, love the Spurs cap, Sean. What's the story behind that? Have you been to AT&T Center?
No, I haven't. And, it's tough getting Spurs gear. I'm not the biggest fan of this hat, but it seems like you got to go to San Antonio to get a good Spurs hat. Like you, I'm a Cowboys fan. So that, I think, when I was younger, got me a little interested in Texas. But I was at a hockey camp in 1992, and a guy was wearing the old Spurs logo hat that had the pink and the blue in it. And I thought, you know what? Any team that's ballsy enough to have pink in its logo, I like those guys, and I've been a Spurs fan ever since. And if you see David Robinson back in the day, the guy's got the most perfect athletic physique that's ever existed. I was a massive David Robinson fan.
The Admiral
sucked me in, and it's been good years with them ever since. The Admiral, the man, in my opinion.
No, I'm a fan. Believe me. And hey, I was at a game in San Antonio a year and a half ago. Snoop Dogg and I were there. He was courtside. He was courtside, and I was in the nosebleeds. But I tell everybody that we were there together.
As long as you were there together, yeah. Hey, next time you go, make sure you give me a heads up. I need you to buy me one of these hats down
they got
from their pro
shop. Wonderful store there. Great stuff, yeah. Okay, Sean, we're watching closely, as you can tell. Thanks for the time today, pal, and stay warm.
Anytime. Can't wait till I'm on next time.
All right, Sean Reynolds joining us from Sportsnet Winnipeg.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.